Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask your blessing on this meeting tonight. We ask for your leadership and your guidance as we have this joint meeting and work to benefit our students, our county. And Lord, so that's what we're asking for. We're seeking wisdom, seeking direction and guidance. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. We will now call the special session of the commissioners along with the school board tonight to talk about some budgets, I would assume. And so we will now call that into session.
Face the colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. First of all, let us invite you and welcome you. Rarely do we have these kind of meetings, so I want everyone to be aware. This is going out, I'm assuming. Okay, so it's going out. So what I would like to do is let the commissioners first introduce themselves for the audience outside of here. Name.
Danny Burns. Kenneth Barton.
Roger Parsons.
And I'm Ben Bushyhead, and I'm the chair. And so having done all of that, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Jerry and let him have his board introduce themselves and his staff that he wants to introduce. So we will sit here with a bated breath and turn it over to you.
We'll start right here and let them introduce themselves.
Kim Carpenter.
Travis Hyatt.
Cody White.
Mitchell Carson.
And I'm Jerry McKinney.
Okay. Jerry McKinney, and then you have some in the back. Mark, would you mind introducing?
We brought Tommy Dills, who is...
Hold on just a second.
I've asked Tommy Dills to come. He's the head of HR, but he's also the head of our maintenance and helps us keep our buildings and our facilities in order. Stephanie Allman is here as our chief financial officer, and we appreciate her and both of what they do. Emily Kite will be speaking to us. She was an employee of the Novus architect firm, but she's branched out into another company now. However, whenever she left Novus, she agreed to help us work through this project even more, and Emily's become family, and we really appreciate her. And of course, I have Joanne Norton with us, who is my right hand, and I appreciate all of them. Now, we have some guests as well today.
Very good. Thank you. You want to mention the person who led our Pledge of Allegiance, and that's Gunnar Sanchez, so we appreciate him as well. Anyone? You want to?
Since you want to go on, here to listen and learn.
Okay, good. And also the person that keeps us straight, standing out in the hall. So we appreciate you, Deputy. Thank you. Do we have to? No, I'm kidding.
Everybody probably knows him, but.
I'm teasing. And also a county manager who has more knowledge in his head than I'll ever have. All the years that I've lived, I haven't gained that much, I don't think. But anyway, Kevin King and Jerry, I'll turn it back over to you.
I'm going to turn it over to Mark and let him go through some of the stuff we got here, but we're here because we're in a crisis. I mean, we literally are in a crisis. We're worried about hiring teachers. He started today sending us names so we can catch people before they even get out of town. But that gets to be where we're looking at a near future, we think, because of pay scale and all that we may be looking at teachers that aren't near qualified. And I don't care what you say and where you go, you can't teach chemistry and you got a degree in social studies, you just can't do it. And the other thing is that we're concerned about is, are we paying our staff enough? I mean, it stayed the same for years, and we're getting some help from the state, and so Mark's already applying that, and that's gonna help. But it's really important about attracting people. The other issue that Mark's gonna point out, and he's got a lot of stuff in here, and she's gonna talk about that too, is all of a sudden, we've got some coaches that just work year-round in track. And he's got statistics in here, I think it's close to 200
Yes.
kids in our school system, that's middle school and high school, in a track program without a track. And we don't have a place next year to have a track. We don't have any place to go to. And so you've got that many kids interested in something that helps them in life and it helps them in school. I am a firm believer that a child in school, if they're involved in something else, anything, our shooting club, our band, our drama, all these things that we have for kids, they buy into it better, and they do better in school, they behave better in school, and I think they end up doing better in life. So I think we've got a crisis on our hand on that. And our big dilemma is we could fix that track up at the high school to make practice this spring and this winter. They run winter track now and use it for that. But we're looking at an enormous cost just for that. It's hard to justify spending, say, close to $1 million to put it in the shape it needs to be in and then use it for 3 or 4 years, whatever it takes to get a new one and not have it. Now, you're not going to lose it because we're always going to have something there. But we've got a lot of critical needs that we hope that you listen to and we're concerned about and we're worried about it. So, Mark, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Something that probably we should do before we go any farther, so that we follow order, is for you to call the meeting into order for the school board, please.
All right. I'll call the meeting to order right this time.
Just for the record, thank you very much. I hope that each of you have a packet of information in front of you, and there is a great deal of information in there, and I recognize that. The first item that I want to show you, though, is the chart that has the green triangle on it, and the reason I want you to see that, a couple of years ago, I came to you and I asked if you would support us entering into a performance contract agreement. Schneider Electric helped guide us through that, and the intent of that was to be able to reduce our energy consumption, increase our energy savings financially, and then use the savings for that to be able to take care of some big ticket items, example, the chillers at East and West. So you agreed to allow us to do that, and we just went through our 1-year audit on that with Schneider, and they came in and told us that not only did we meet the projected $157,000 in savings, but we went past that by $24,000 and actually saved $181,000. So we were able to meet our financial burden and also decrease our energy consumption, which I believe is a win-win. So I want to say thank you all for supporting us in that, and I also want to use that point as evidence that we really, as a school system, we really are trying to use our funds in an efficient and effective way and not burden the county with extra bills. We're taking care of that piece ourselves, and we will continue to do that. Now, when I came into this position, one of the things that I wanted was to know exactly what our capital needs, our facility needs were, because we could walk around all day and we could look at buildings and say, well, we need this and we need that, but there needed to be a comprehensive report. And so I asked Novus to prepare that report for us. And before she comes, I want to say that unfortunately we did not receive the critical needs grant this time. There were 78 counties, and 28 counties received funding in some sort. I have been in contact, or tried to be in contact, with the Department of School Improvement at DPI. I've sent 2 emails, and I've called them twice and have received no response. When Ms. Kite, who is going to speak in just a minute, came into my office, she said, have you heard from the Director of School Improvement at DPI? And I said, no, I've done this and I've done that. She said, neither has anyone else. So what's happened is they're overwhelmed at DPI with requests for information, and they're not able to get that information out just yet. This is what we know. There will be another round of applications, and our application is already there for them to look at. The general thought right now is that they will look at what they have and they will apply the remainder of them to the criteria that they have decided as their rubric for decision making. We don't know what that rubric looks like. I am hoping that that office will return my call and give us an opportunity to perhaps improve our application for them. Okay? But we're just a little bit caught on where we are with that group in each of them. Okay? Now, with that being said, I would like for Ms. Kite to go through our facility needs study and bring everyone up to date on what the current needs are.
Here you go. Okay, yes, Mark. Put it over here. See if we can. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for inviting me to come speak with you this evening. It's been a real pleasure to work with the school district on this facilities needs assessment and sort of long-range planning. There we go. Our partners in this project were McGill Associates. They're a civil engineering firm in Asheville that we work with. They did, and also mechanical and plumbing and electrical engineering. They did a lot of our building assessment work around those systems in your buildings, as well as some site analysis work for us, which we'll talk about, and that many of you have been part of those conversations. Harper General Contractors also worked with us and provided a lot of the cost estimating and data around the work that we have determined needs to happen in the buildings and some of the longer range, bigger capital projects as well. These are the facilities that we looked at as part of the assessment: Swain High School, Swain Middle School, Bright Adventure Pre-K facility, East and West Elementary Schools, the bus garage, the maintenance buildings, and the central office annex were all part of the needs assessment that we conducted. I want to talk a little bit about how we went about the process. The first step, of course, was to meet with the school folks and the district to establish the evaluation criteria. What were the things and the information that the school district was looking to get from this report that we needed to take into consideration when we were doing our assessments. We collected and analyzed all of the data on site at the various facilities that we studied as part of the report. And then from there, and all of the data and working with the school district folks, we developed and prioritized our recommendations based on the findings at each of those campuses and the various conversations and feedback that we got from district folks, as well as commission folks. The evaluation criteria that we used, we started off with school and life safety. We looked at building code analysis and other school safety criteria, visitor access, campus circulation, those kinds of things at each of the campuses. We looked at educational and program competency. That was talking about enrollment capacity. Are there plans for growth in the district in terms of increases in enrollment? How are the district facilities aligned with NCDPI recommendations around programming and the size and the square footages of spaces within each of the schools? And how do we support students with disabilities or faculty with disabilities throughout our campuses, primarily looking at the ADA compliance and code-related issues around accessibility. Looking at building integrity, what is the life expectancy of our major systems and equipment and roofs and windows and doors and other major building components? Is there evidence of building damage that exists in those buildings that we were looking at? Is there evidence of water infiltration? Most of us know that when water gets into buildings, it makes our buildings age more quickly than they should otherwise, and that's a key thing that we look at when we're looking at the quality and the condition of our existing buildings is whether or not we have water intrusion coming in through roofs or through wall assemblies in our buildings. We also looked at indoor air quality. Certainly coming out of the pandemic, that was a very big topic of discussion and a very big priority for the assessment, was to look at our existing operational HVAC systems and things in our buildings and make recommendations around how to better control humidity and fresh air and air cleaning strategies that we might need to use in the future should we face a pandemic again. How did we collect our data? We did site visits, we walked around each of the buildings, we took photographs, we had our entire team members, including those folks that were cost estimating with us. We partnered with maintenance and facilities personnel to get feedback on site as we were looking at the various conditions throughout the buildings. We interviewed personnel from the school district in terms of what were hot emerging priorities or urgencies from their standpoint as well. We had work sessions with board members to help us evaluate the information that we were collecting on site. We documented the life expectancy, understanding when equipment has been replaced, when have roofs been replaced, and what's the warranty period and the industry standard life expectancy around those pieces of equipment or those building components, and when will they come up for replacement if the need isn't particularly urgent for a particular thing as we were doing our assessments. We looked at the current enrollment data. We looked for evidence of capacity challenges at schools. Do we have modulars because we don't have enough classrooms? Are we reconfiguring existing spaces that might suggest to us that we have a capacity deficit in our buildings to accommodate current enrollment? And what does that tell us about how to plan in the future to accommodate such growth as we think about those in the collective and context of the overall master plan? In the packets that are in front of you, I don't expect you to read the text necessarily on this slide. It's an example of one of the pages that's in your report. Every building that we assessed has these sort of data sheets that is a documentation and a collection of the things that we found when we were on site and the feedback that we were getting from district personnel. It includes photographs and a summary list of the various types of information around those evaluation criteria that we were looking at. And so that is all there for future reference for the district and for you folks as you start to plan how to tackle some of the recommendations that we make. And so each school has at least one page. It sort of depends on the amount of needs that we discovered at a particular facility as to how much information is included in that report. But each of those buildings have these sort of general data sheets in there as well. So once we collected all of our data and documented our data sheets for each of our schools, we started to work with the district to evaluate and to make some recommendations around the data that we were finding. And there's several key categories that data is sort of, that our recommendations can be found in. We've got the first two things a little bit go hand in hand. One is large-scale capital projects. When can we anticipate needing to replace buildings because of their age or condition that makes them extremely expensive to continue to operate and to maintain, whereby a new building might be of better cost benefit to the district? Along with that, we identified some future planning studies for longer range needs that can ripple as a result of some of the building replacements that we put at the top of the priority list. From there, we have maintenance needs. These are ongoing maintenance type issues that the maintenance department, facilities folks in the district try to tackle as they come up. We put those needs into really 3 buckets: an immediate need bucket, a 5-year need bucket, and a 10-year need bucket. And those things in the 10-year needs are those pieces of equipment or building components that might be still fine right now or still under warranty right now, but in the course of the 10-year look ahead, those warranties will start to expire, or those pieces of equipment will reach the end of their useful life just sort of on an industry standard kind of a metric there as well. So those are the 3 buckets of maintenance needs. And then the 6th part of the report with regards to recommendations is really the budgeting around how do we plan for expenditures that would be required to tackle large-scale capital projects along with these buckets of ongoing maintenance needs that are going to come up at the 5-year and the 10-year mark and immediately as well. So that's also included in your report, is the budgeting for that. So when it comes to the capital projects, if we start at the top of our list of recommendations, as part of our study with the school district, we included site analysis of the 45-acre parcel that is across the street from the high school. And many of you were involved in quite detailed conversations around the best use for that to meet some of the needs that we've identified in this report. And those capital needs include the replacement middle school, which we spoke about in the context of the NCDPI grants. And that was identified really as the highest priority need for the district. In addition to that, we know that there's a need for high school athletic fields. This is moving a little bit higher in the needs list because of some recent developments in terms of urgency for additional high school athletic fields and replacement of fields that you currently have. The district has a need for replacing the preschool. There's some opportunity to expand programming, and also the buildings that preschool is currently housed in are reaching the end of their useful operational life as well. Beyond that, there is a need to replace the bus garage, and even way beyond that, next sort of very long range from there would be a replacement high school. That could start sort of thinking about that as some of these more urgent needs materialize. So the top priority and the good amount of our study with regards to the 45-acre site and also, of course, the existing high school campus was a replacement middle school, either located on the 45-acre parcel or more popularly proposed the existing high school campus. I'm not going to talk in great deal about that. I think we've all had plenty of information around that, and we're a little bit of a holding pattern with the grant funding at the moment. But that was identified as the highest priority. Long range after that was an opportunity for the district to continue to plan and explore the adaptive reuse of the existing existing middle school campus, that could continue to serve the district in another use. It's really beyond what it's capable of doing as a middle school, but it could be part of a conversation that begins to reuse that campus for other needs like the preschool facility or something else. And so that was a recommendation for sort of longer range study and planning to look at feasibility of using that campus in the future once a new middle school is constructed. Also in your report with regards to these bigger capital projects and recommendations are additional sheets, which I, again, don't expect you to be able to read the text on here. Just as an example, this particular sheet is for the bus garage. It includes the cost estimating in today's dollars around what that bus garage might cost. And that works as a baseline piece of information for us as we get closer and closer to the time where that becomes a high priority, because we've addressed some of those things that are above it on the list as a tool for us to use as we continue to plan into the future. And so those sheets exist for all of those capital project recommendations that we've made throughout the report. The maintenance needs, those are some of the most urgent things that we've included in the report. We've talking about that in those 3 different buckets: the immediate needs, the 5-year needs, and the 10-year needs. This is a little bit of a summary slide that tallies all of those costs by bucket. And you look on the left-hand column, of course, that's a list of all the facilities and the total dollar value in today's dollars of what those needs are in those particular budgets as a starting place to help you plan for funding of those projects moving forward. Again, in the report are additional sheets that categorize those items and those sort of the to-do list in those 3 buckets in much greater detail to help with the planning of those projects by maintenance and facilities personnel. You can see that same blue bar at the bottom is those totals by school, and each of those 3 buckets And then the column on the left are those sort of different evaluation criteria components of where those particular needs fall in terms of how we evaluated each campus. Some of the past challenges, the maintenance is always, of course, an ongoing thing, that schools never escape the need to do maintenance on their buildings. And so there will always be something that's urgent. Some of the challenges that the maintenance department has faced is in tackling some of those needs is the availability of local contractors and subcontractors. We're at the mercy of a local workforce that right now is extremely busy. And so they're even less available than they have historically been. Costs of work are escalating, and so it's very difficult to predict well what the budget should be and to plan for that accordingly. When you have more expensive work and a shortage of workers to do it, you end up with challenges in getting projects completed on a schedule that is suitable to a school calendar. We focus a lot of times in the summer months when kids aren't on campus so that the work that we're doing is the least disruptive. That becomes a bigger challenge. We have to start planning those projects much earlier in order to line up with that summer window, and with labor shortages and increases in costs and material availability, that becomes a more difficult thing to get accomplished in the summer. And I think that's some of what the district has faced in challenges. Projects they've been ready to do don't work out because they don't get enough response from local contractors, or they miss the window schedule-wise in terms of material availability as well. And so part of the conversation, this has really been led by Mark and the district folks, in talking about different ways to strategize around some of these smaller scale urgent maintenance items. And I'm going to sort of click through the slides here a little bit, and I'm going to let Mark explain in greater detail a little bit of a different approach and how to think about tackling some of these ongoing maintenance issues that the schools will continue to face.
One of the things that we would like to do, and I believe we have the capacity to put into place, is a small project team that would consist of 3 individuals who would come in at by and large, an entrance level salary. And they would be tasked with completing some of the projects that are listed in this facilities study. Now, these 3 individuals would not be current members necessarily of our maintenance team, or if one of them should happen to move off of the maintenance team onto that small project team, we would replace that person in our maintenance department. And so, in short, what we're looking at doing is building a small group of personnel who can take care of labor-intensive projects in our school system that would enable us to not have to rely on outside contractors. What we believe would happen by using these 3 individuals is we would cut out some middle cost in the process that contractors often bring with them. It also provides for us another opportunity to actually work with some new individuals in the school system and have them pursue training and licensing and certifications, so that as we move through time and some of our current maintenance individuals perhaps age out or retire, we'll have someone to replace them with. So there are multifacets to this. The funding source that we want to use for this is Article 46, quarter-cent sales, because it is a capital need. They will be doing capital projects. We feel confident that that is an effective use of that funding. And I've had conversation with Kevin, and I believe that he is in agreement with that this is a good approach for us. So we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $160,000, $170,000. Is that correct, Tommy, for 3? Something like that. That was our estimation. That would come out of that fund for this purpose. You'll find in your pack, and I don't want to have you rifle through it right now, but you'll find that there is a list of the projects that Novus has put together. And at least 50% of those projects can be completed with a small project team, because they are just high maintenance and low expertise. It's just work. That's one approach that we want to use.
It also frees up your local contractor workforce to tackle some of those bigger projects that do require stronger licensing or more expertise to complete those projects where you might need a design team to engineer replacement of larger systems. And those projects tend to be more attractive to bidders, especially in this climate when there is an enormous amount of work to go around. Their bidders are more likely to be interested in that scale of project than they are some of the smaller work as well. So it does help you make better use of a local labor force in tackling some of these needs. So some of your next steps, we've gotten all of the information down, we've made some recommendations. I think the school board is clear on what the priorities are. I think we've done we're in a holding pattern a little bit on the middle school project until we get some better feedback from DPI. That's coming. All of the applications have been sort of ranked in order of some criteria that DPI has used to evaluate them. It's our understanding that those, with additional funding that we hope comes available in the early part of the fall, that they will continue in that same order that those applications were ranked to fund additional projects. And so that's where the reapplying for the grant may not be necessary, because they're going to work off of the list. And I think they're also not going to accept new applications for projects that have not already been applied for. So it's a matter of, clearly there was a lot of demand for that funding, and so hopefully the state legislature takes the hint that there's a lot of districts in really high need for funding to help with their facilities. So that's it. In terms of the master plan, however, the next steps, there's really some things that can run concurrently. Obviously, the replacement of the middle school is something that would start as soon as y'all are comfortable. Some design work can happen in advance of an award for a grant, which I think if we had a better sense from DPI and some feedback on where we might fall in the list of rankings of applications, that might be a step that you could take in starting the design process in anticipation of a grant that might get awarded this fall. In addition to that, running parallel to that thinking and work around the middle school, these obviously immediate maintenance needs can be started and in progress as well. Next steps really in both, after the middle school, there's some certainty around that. The next step around the long-range planning would be to conduct a planning study around the best ways to use the existing middle school campus that might include addressing some of those capital project priorities that are farther down the list. Pre-K maybe being the next big conversation for the district to have on how to best meet the needs of the county in that way. And the next step really in terms of maintenance, running parallel maybe to the planning study, is the ongoing maintenance of your master plan. What the master plan isn't is a nice fancy paperweight. It's not intended to be a static document. It's intended for you to continue to utilize it and for it to be a tool for you to plan even beyond the 10-year duration that was identified in this particular report. You should conduct periodic assessments of urgencies. Have things changed? Has your enrollment and projections shifted dramatically? Are your building conditions worsening at a rate that's different than what we anticipate for some reason? Has your access to funding changed in some remarkable way that either could speed up some of your priorities or have to slow them down? So that's one opportunity to do some maintenance on your plan. The next opportunity is you should always be calculating your budget. We've set these budgets with a baseline of $2022 because that's the data that we have. Right now there's an enormous amount of volatility in the construction market with regards to pricing. And certainly over the course of 10 years, we would anticipate some expectation of escalation to occur. Right now, we're seeing pretty big escalation in comparison to some historical data over the last 10 or 15 years. We don't know if that's going to continue at that pace or that speed or for how long. And so we may see a slowdown in the escalation. And so there's always opportunity for you to recalculate your budget data working off of these baseline numbers. It also can be impacted by the amount of funding that you have. or your opportunities to access funding that's not currently available to you. You would update your master plan if you add new assets or change your priorities. If you acquire additional property, you would want to look at that property in the context of the overall priorities in the master plan and determine whether or not something needs to shift. You would also respond to shifting needs in the community. If there's feedback from your community that there's a particular need that's currently going unmet that the school system could fill, then that would be a time to take a look at the master plan and to evaluate how that might fit into some of these other priorities we've already identified. Your maintenance timeline, I think in about 2 to 3 years, you're going to start taking a look at that 5-year and that 10-year list of things to do and to making sure that we understand what the market's doing with regards to cost and getting those projects, if there's designers required to tackle some of that work, getting those folks on board so that you can be ready to hit your milestones. If you changes in leadership, changes in the economy, changes in assets would be a time in terms of looking ahead into what's coming on the master plan. And of course, in anticipation of the end of the 10 years that's outlined here, you could get yourself moving 5 years beyond that with some additional work and some additional evaluation of your assets as well. And that's really the summary of everything that I've brought today. I'm happy to take any questions either on the report or anything else we've sort of worked on throughout the timeline of the project.
So this would be a good point, in my opinion, to open the floor for questions, clarification, or discussion. Emily is masterful in her understanding, and those points, those questions, the clarification can come from anyone. So, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners, do you have any questions thus far? I mean, not studying this as much as you studied it, of course, we have a lot of,
For sure.
questions that may or may not be sound apropos at this time, but I think there are some that we need to just get out on the table. On that, that's one. Commissioners? Hearing none from ours, you have your board that has questions. I'm sure they've been through it.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions with it. It's the biggest one that we can fit all these needs into a time schedule and a time period that we can afford. But we obviously can't do those in the next 24 months. But they are there, and it's a good guideline, I think. It's a good master plan to look at and see if we can knock these things down over the next several years.
If the middle school happens,
Yes, sir.
the preschool,
Yes, sir.
will it move into that particular building, or is that particular building worthy to hold them? The one where the middle school is up on the hill, is above those?
I believe that would need to be a further discussion. I know that the intent and the possibility of using the middle school for a pre-K campus has been discussed. I think, though, that there are some restrictions that we need to be honest about. Okay, pre-K classrooms have to meet some specific design parameters. There has to be a bathroom in each room. That would have to be constructed. None of the rooms up there have bathrooms. There has to be external access for every classroom to a play area. Now, that doesn't mean that it has to necessarily empty out onto a play area, but there has to be a way for us to meet that guideline, because that's part of accreditation for a pre-K. There are other concepts for the use of that facility that could also address pre-K needs. I have had expressed to me, why could we not take our existing elementary schools and turn them into primary schools, pre-K through second grade? Put 2 pre-Ks on each end and turn this into an intermediate elementary, 3 through 5. But see, we haven't explored that very deeply yet. So the answer to your question, Mr. Bushyhead, is I believe that yes, if we get the middle school grant, we need to immediately, as we're looking at the construction of that and moving into the construction, examine what is the best use of that building in light of our need for an expanded pre-K program, and then be flexible with where we go.
Now,
That answer
like
your
structurally, it's good, but it needs some like HVAC and, I mean,
Yes.
it needs all your regular maintenance needs from 1991. That was like the last,
Structurally, it's fine.
yeah, it's fine.
That doesn't mean that every building, though, would be left sitting like it is right now.
Yeah.
You know, there are some buildings that, certainly not the stone building, because that's almost a monument.
It's also in the best condition of all of the
That's
buildings.
really amazing.
the
The oldest
periodic,
building's
yeah.
in the best condition.
Yeah. Well, and that's partly because it was sited the best too. When you're the first building on a site, you can pick the best spot. And so the drainage is better, the materials and the quality that we built with then we face budget challenges that make us make decisions differently sometimes with regards to but when you infill sites that already have buildings on it, you put it in a spot that's left, and there's a reason no one chose that spot in the first place sometimes. So that's partly why I think that building is in such good shape comparatively, because it was the first one there.
The information that is shared with us tonight, do we have any facilities to house the middle school other than what needs to be built?
To my knowledge and understanding, no, sir. We don't have space in any of the other facilities for that.
Is part of this is the question always comes up, have you looked at and what are you looking at as far as acquisition of new lands?
We are not looking at the acquisition of new land because we would need and would feel obligated to have a conversation with you as commissioners for that. The purchase of that would be a county purchase. Now, I believe that it is worth putting on the table of discussion that the 45 acres sitting above the high school is problematic to build on. And perhaps there is additional land somewhere in the county that would be more readily available for construction. And would whoever owns that land be willing to consider a land swap or what? I don't know. But those are conversations that are bigger than us by ourselves, and certainly above my pay grade. But I believe that it's worth considering, Mr. Bushhead.
Well, I think it's worth considering, and I think the discussion has to happen so we have an idea of what acreage we're looking at and where and how that comes about. Definitely has to be a discussion topic.
And I believe that as part of that, we would need to decide exactly what do we want to put on that land. Because when you start speaking about the amount of acreage that's needed for a middle school that is recommended, it's about 15 acres for a middle school site.
Yeah.
Then you have to consider how much acreage would be needed for some of the other things that we need, including a new track facility. That becomes a very large discussion.
Also, it appears that the garage, have you talked about a place for the garage?
You know, I have, and there are probably multiple sites on current school property, county property that's been relegated for schools that could be used. But in my mind, just right now, making a statement, if we were to move the pre-K buildings off of the land where they're sitting now, that is a perfect place for a bus garage. It's perfect. And it's good use of land that we already have in place.
But the blocker there, of course, is moving pre-K.
Yes. And-
Well, the
and-
blocker's the 45 acres that was bought by a different board.
Now, and I want to speak to that just for a minute, Mitch, and that is there has been a question about geo soundings. We have located those. We've located them. And it was with the predecessing.
So the firm prior to Novus, in about 2012, did some borings as part of a study for an athletic building on that site. There's about 9 borings that were taken, and they're all on the sort of western side of the property that runs from the access point on Fontana Road, kind of up to the top of the hill where we've always been showing potential building site for a future school or for a track and field. We've found the geotech engineer that did that report, and they're pulling it from their archives to get us all a copy of that report. From their recollection, we hit rock, which should be of no surprise to anyone. I think that's always been part of our conversation is there. And I think that they did some follow-up on some seismic analysis of the site as well. And what we're not clear on is what the findings were of that particular part of the analysis. But they are pulling that report. So I hope to have that in a few days, and Kevin, I'll share that with you, and Mark, I'll pass that along to you as well.
We'll share that,
Those
we'll share that
records.
information with everyone.
Yeah.
Mr. Bushied, Mr. Chair, with the borings that you found, there's 9. How many more needs to be done on the rest of the site to check it out that we will have to pay for before any of this also?
Typically, what we would do is to have a working concept of where we want to propose either athletic fields or buildings, which is some of the study that we've already conducted as part of this report. And we would identify additional borings. I can say recently on a high school campus, we did about 45 borings total in and around some existing buildings and some new building area that was proposed. And so there is limited borings at this point. There were a lot more done in the portion of the site that was being proposed as an athletic facility back in 2012. So about half of those 9 borings are within the footprint of what that building was going to be. And then there's 4 or 5 borings that sort of go up to the top of the site there as well. So it is good information for us to have, and I think as we get closer to a working concept of, we would target additional borings in some other locations on the site. There's a good bit of clearing that needed to happen as part of those borings to get the rigs up to where they needed to be for that testing, so that would be another consideration that we would take as well, is being able to get the equipment to those sections of the site that are currently pretty heavily wooded.
Thank you. And Mr. Bushied, I have another question. This is not for you.
Yeah.
This is for the school board. Listening to the hurdles that's in the way, grant funding is one of them for the middle school for that to happen. We need to do borings and all that stuff to prepare the site to begin with before we even get the funding, do we not? Is that something that we need to move forward in if we're going to use that site? Or do we wait for the funding for that and take it out of the middle school funding, or?
Well, we were gonna put the middle school below the high school.
I know, but
You talking for the fields?
when we do that, we're supposed to go ahead and do the fields and everything, so we're gonna be doing the, if we wait on the middle school funding, the $40 million, are we gonna use some more of that to do the boring and site preparation before we get to actual the $9 million to fix the site? Is that what it was?
Oh, to put
On the
fields
hill,
on the 45 acres?
acres.
Yeah, there was the delta between the funding that was available from the grant and the total cost of the project that included the fields. It was about 13 total
It was
million in our
13.
last
So even-
presentation, yeah.
So we're gonna be over that, so we're gonna have to come up with funding,
Yes.
Yes.
a whole lot of funding for that.
I would also say, just for the, in terms of background on the grants, I think it is likely that DPI allocated grant funding to those 28 counties that received it that was different than what they requested in some cases. So they were if the request was for 40 million, it's possible that some of those districts didn't get a full 40 million in their allocation, and so that's a metric that we're not privy to from DPI, but I do think anecdotally some of those 28 districts did not get the full request of their funding. So that would be another part just to consider.
All right, with that said, what is the Article 46 money being spent on now?
basically any maintenance and then whatever is extra is going into the public school capital fund.
Is there extra?
Yes,
How much extra?
About $1 million.
yes.
$1 million.
It's in the capital fund right now, yes.
Yeah.
1 million in the capital fund. And we take in how much every year on
Right
that?
now, $500,000, but it's been, it may fluctuate. We're looking at a downturn of about 5% next fiscal year, so.
So we're looking at a downturn, but we take in, what critical need, is it the track the most important thing, or the facility needs the most important thing?
I think at the
If we
moment-
don't get the funding,
I think at the moment, looking at it, the track is the need. You agree?
Yeah, we're gonna have that funding to even talk about a middle school. But a track is, and that's the dilemma that we're at, Mr. Partner, to fix up what we've got, which is never beneficial anyway.
Yeah, there'll be about $2 million worth of work probably to the middle school,
Yeah.
like heating and air and.
the heating and air stuff was, we already agreed we'd help with any of that to go along with this other stuff, this, chart. The performance contract we signed in, did we not agree to,
Well, I think they backed it off the table because,
we backed?
one, it was, during COVID, and the accessibility to the, actual machinery was gonna be hard to get. I think they just pulled that back in hopes that we would get a grant for the critical needs stuff. I think that's what we.
I think that's a piece of it.
And then we'll have to get it done in June and July, so we'll have to schedule it out.
But the heating and air definitely needs done at the middle school.
Yes.
So we don't even need to be, we need to find funding for something like that regardless, do we? Is that, I mean, I've heard lots of complaints about it. We talked about it for a long time. I don't know if that's one of the main things we're looking to fund, or,
That is a.
I mean, we got a big list here, so we're either gonna have to come together and say what has to be done first, and what's something that we can't even worry about right now. I mean, does that sound like something we might need to do?
Yeah, it should be on that immediate maintenance schedule.
Well, even on the immediate maintenance stuff, there's probably several things that,
Well, some of those we can take care of with that three-man team.
Yes.
with the three-man team, we can take care of the heating and air and all that?
No,
No. What can we
That'll have
take
to
care of
contract.
with the three-man team?
Anything that requires a lot of manual labor and not certifications, we can take care of with a three-man team.
let's see.
Like, what would be an example of that?
We have walls that need to be cleaned and water sealed. We can do that.
Cleaning and sealing, stuff like that,
We
not
have-
anything major
No.
can be done with the three-man team.
There can be some minor construction that can happen, but nothing major like we're looking at with a building. We have drainage issues that we need to look at that a three-man team could take care of.
Tommy?
Just an example, one of the things that we've run into is at pre-K, for example, the underpinning underneath those mobile units has crumbled, and we're having to replace all that because it's not intended to be there for as long as it is. It's gonna cost us about $6,400 worth of materials, but the labor was about 125% when I got that quoted from local contractors about what that small piece was. It'd take us probably 2 weeks, it'd save us $7,000, with a three-man crew, 2 weeks would be a long time for that. So, I mean, that saves $7,000. And then it's just a few little things as you go, like the French drains around the schools, a couple of odds and ends like that, that small crew can do and will free us up with the other guys that we've been using, that have been doing that, the things that they're actually hired to do, the maintenance pieces, a lot of the other stuff have fallen off, and we've fallen behind, just because we can't keep up with the volume of things that's there. And these people will be able to help us not have to overload small roofing projects, things like that, that we can do without having to then turn that over to contractors and have to pay. And it, because in my opinion, and I know everybody's gotta make a living, but some of the prices that we're being quoted are exorbitant by contractors, if we can get it priced at all. Our cafeteria, for example, was priced at $200,000 last year, we had one bidder. This past year, we re-let it for bid, nothing. The same thing with our HVAC. We didn't get anybody that would bid on it, because nobody wants to work inside those time constraints that they face with what we're dealing with right now. So we are in the midst of some of the things that everybody's running into in terms of the availability of material, workmanship, and the ability to be able to work within the timeframes that we have to work. Because we can't have ductwork going in August, September, and October.
So,
Three-man, excuse me just a second, is a three-man team to be hired, or are they hired and on staff?
To be hired.
So,
which might be a problem in itself.
right. Because if you can't get anybody to apply for any other job, how do you, what's your expectation of getting persons for these?
That's valid.
That is valid.
Is there any way to extend the window of time to get things fixed?
No, that ain't anywhere to put kids.
Do what?
Not without having anywhere to put kids. While we're having to work in a section, you have to have somewhere to put them. So, I mean, it makes you become creative about different things you can do. We've talked about, like, the high school HVAC, when it comes to fruition, we have to tackle that. If we do it a section at a time, because that's not gonna be a summer project.
No.
We have to do that a piece at a time, then we'll have to do something with maybe mobile units to put outside for one section at a time, so we can rotate kids in classrooms into those mobile units as we do that project over the course of a year, or possibly longer.
Can you do that with the middle school?
Uh,
Can you do that rent mobile units? And
The answer to the question is yes. I don't know where we would put them, but yes, you can.
And you have to get them, you don't have them yet, the mobile units.
The mobile units.
I don't have an estimate for that in any way, because we've just begun to think that in that direction. I'm sorry, Emily.
No, that's fine. You don't have the mobile units yet. Those do take a long time now, surprise, like everything else. But we work in operational campus settings all the time. And designers who design schools can help figure phasing out. And there probably are projects on that list that could be phased and sequenced with a plan to where to swing kids into temporary space to free up and to be available. And it would be a matter of looking at which of the needs identified are best suited for that kind of an approach. Because not everything can happen in the summer, and because we are seeing longer lead times and longer schedule times from contractors. So there are definitely those strategies, and some of them come with cost because of the need for modulars and logistics and those kinds of things. But we do work in campuses all the time that have kids in them, and some projects are better suited than others for that particular kind of approach. But
So I think to your question, Mr. Parton, if we don't receive the grant for the middle school, we are going to have to address the HVAC at the middle school. That's a considerable need. We did back off of that as we were looking at some constrictions because of created by COVID. And the pricing started going out the roof on us. We need to move back to that. We have serious HVAC needs at the high school also at this point. We have some serious electrical needs, and I've got those listed on one of these pages. It's on the page underneath number 4, actually underneath number 5, the RFQ or design build. And these electrical needs have been identified by the Novus team as they walked through. There are some pieces there, Ms. Parton, that are serious that we've got to take care of soon. But that'll have to be contracted. We can't do that ourselves. So those are critical.
But they're These are the critical things down here,
Those are critical,
not
yes.
these up here.
Well, if, depending upon your perspective, the track is critical because we don't have one. And at this point, we have lost access to the Cherokee Central Schools as a facility to host any kind of meetings. We cannot, at the high school, do that. It's too short, it's degrading, and there aren't enough lanes, we don't have enough space.
We used to have track meets in that field all the time. didn't
Used to, and the thing, you
we?
know.
Why, what changed? The
Well, it's
rules?
kinda, a lot of it's changed from, that's pretty much just pavement. They don't use that anymore. They use the rubber surface that we don't have. And also, they use 8 lanes. We got 5, and we can really only use probably 3 of those because of the stuff on the outside. It's really dangerous on the inside lane because of the fence, and field events. A lot of these places you go to have the space for that, and we just don't have the space there either. It's fine to practice on, I think. Still kind of dangerous. I don't know if you know, when you go to running the curves or whatever, it's just still loose. But it's like everything else, it's changed since we was in school. You know, we didn't have pole vaulting then. We do now. But the surface is the main thing, I think. You know, it's just a rubber surface that they use now. So that's the big difference and why we couldn't use it like we used to.
Is there a distance issue?
There is a distance issue, yes.
And we're looking at what for the distance issue?
Well, it just needs to be big, I mean, we could probably still use what we have as far as markings and stuff, but size-wise, it's not the right distance as a certified track.
I understand too, that the other schools no longer wanted to come there because, you know, if you're running say a 440, you've got to run that whole track and then probably halftime again. So it's kind of hard to mark off. And again, there's not enough lanes for it either. We couldn't expand it. There wasn't enough room to expand it. Couldn't widen it because it's too tight. What we're talking about now is seeing if there's a way we can redo the pavement and then get some kind of a surface on it, because you can't just run on that pavement. That's unsafe. Because right now there's cracks in it that big. I don't want those kids running on it this spring, and so they're not gonna have any place. And like you said, there is no place really for the jumping events and the high jumps and all of those kind of jumps. We're trying to find that. So the kids are they're doing good with what they've got, but that's the concern that we've got right now. How much money? I wouldn't mind putting some money if we find it into it for practice and keep them so they've got a practice place until we can build a track. But then we're going to have to do all of our meets away. It was mentioned to me that we can go to Western and rent it, but you know, I don't know about that. That's not a Swain meet still because you're going that distance. So I don't have an answer for it, except that's what we're looking at. The other issue is we have talked about it. If we could sell that 45 acres, if we could find a place somewhere to put a track. And that's rare in Swain County. Now, I know of a few places. I don't know if they'd sell it. We've talked about some. I went to look at a gentleman today, see if I could find him. I could, to see if they put a price on some acreage over behind where I live, if you know where that's at, the Davis Cemetery area. I don't know if you've been in that, not Davis, Watkins Cemetery. I don't know if you've been in that area or not, but that's flat as it could be. So we're still looking at those avenues, but I don't have a concrete answer on it. And then the placement of the middle school at the high school attracted me in particular because I could foresee that many students having a lot more security on one campus. And you'd have 3 resource officers, you would have a lot more security for kids in that school, in that area. You could close it off better. And that's an issue anymore. So there's just a lot of unanswered questions you said that.
And I think one of the things, gentlemen, that we're looking at is repairs eating into the new buildings. I mean, the cost of repairs.
Yes.
When you're having to double that and you're looking to build a new building, the cost of repairs is, so you almost, have to double dip there in order to come up with the money to stay ahead of the situation until you can get the school built.
Well, that's like the high school. We've done a lot of repairs over the years, and it's in pretty good shape. And then we got that U section. But the heating and air system has been there since
It's
day
20 years
one.
old.
Uh,
It's 20 years old.
yeah, so. And that, those, in your own home, that's a pretty
Yeah.
long time to last.
So, Mr. Parton, I want to go back to your question, what's critical? And I said, depending upon your perspective, okay? To me, I think it's critical that we look at how we can provide a track facility. I think that it is critical that we have a three-man team so that we can control the cost of repairs with a little more accuracy and efficiency. I think it's very important that we look at the HVAC and the electrical pieces that have been presented to us as means. That's how I categorize them. If I were to use colors, it would be a track is a red, the three-man team is red, and the HVAC and electrical is a strong yellow. We've got to move on it.
I would say the electrical and stuff would be a definite high up there. The affordability of doing the track and stuff, I mean, we can probably afford to do more electrical work than we can the new track. I mean, if we got to have an idea where you guys are thinking about the track. If you're thinking about on top of the 45 acres, then we know it's gonna cost $13 million or whatever to flatten that out. And that was before we do the other core drillings and see how much more rock or where the positions of the rock is. And rock, it's gonna go up if there's more rock. I know that for a fact. Rock costs money to move.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and I mean, if I'm up for any ideas, if there's other properties that are more suitable or anybody got any more ideas on something feasible, I don't know that it's feasible to work on that first if we got to do the HVAC stuff. If we're waiting, we're having to wait on
And that's
other
another
stuff.
problem. I mean, if we wait, you say 13 million, 5 years, it could be 22 million. So,
22.
you know, it's just gonna continue to go up.
If we're gonna use that land, we need to be preparing to use that land.
Agreed.
If we're not gonna use that land, that's a decision we all need to make.
Agreed.
If we're
And-
gonna
and
look
Mr.
for
Parton,
another option.
I think that you just put the question on the table that needs to be decided. Are we going to use it or not? And that's your all's decision. But that's got to be made.
But that's our decision.
I believe.
Whether we're gonna look for more land or, well, we
can
gotta,
look-
it's part of your guys' decision too, because we need some more options here besides
And
just
we're willing
you
to-
decide this. Because a school board pushed for the purchase of this, and I know the county put, I mean, but it was all purchased for the use of the school.
Understand.
And so, I mean, it's all of us. We're all in this together. It's, we
And
can,
No, those are good questions.
That's right.
I agree.
if we wanna talk about it,
Because that's why I'm like Kenneth, I think we ought to move ahead and try to get some more core drilling done so we know what we're dealing with. And
What is the cost of the core drillings that you have to do?
I don't know.
it's expensive too. And you gotta have dozer work to clean out
Yes.
spots to get to, so you have to hire somebody to.
Pardon?
I think I know the people that excavated for the last big one in 2012.
Yeah, and I don't certainly have any specific, it does matter how many borings that we take. We've done a baseline amount of cost analysis on that site, and in every scenario that we looked at, we were moving a substantial amount of dirt. The cost and the baseline for us, I think, just in preparing a site for buildings or fields was about $5 million worth of dirt moving. That will only get more expensive the more rock we find on the site by doing more borings.
I do have a question on it, and
Yes.
you might not be able to answer it, you might. If it's more rock in the material, we can't fill in?
Yes, it does make it more challenging. One of the issues that we were having on that site and all of the various options that we discovered was getting the site to balance, where when we cut from one area, we have somewhere to put it. And the biggest reason for that is because the areas that we needed to cut were steeper than the places that we have to fill. And so we were cutting at a faster rate than we could fill the site to make it flat. When we have rock, that's not suitable fill material to fill in the low spots to make something flat. And so the more rock we find, the more difficult and more costly the site work will become on that particular site. So we're starting at a baseline of about $5 million to move dirt around. That varied slightly from concept to concept that we looked at, whether it was buildings or whether it was fields, whether it was a softball field or a baseball field or a track and field or whatever the various scenarios that many of you helped us with, and we moved those pieces around on that site. I would be surprised if there was a concept out there that significantly reduced the cost of development on that site to get it into a buildable scenario. And certainly the more geotech information we have, the more final those numbers become, but I don't anticipate a discovery that would result in an enormous amount of savings from what we've already estimated.
And there is a road through there, it just needs to be cleaned out. I mean, as far as access goes, I don't think it would take, as far as the boring goes, a lot to get to where we need to get. There's a road that goes all the way through it, it just needs to be cleaned out.
What do you guys think about the suitability of using that?
What was the original cost of that project?
I have no idea.
$3.2 million.
Well, the thing about it is too, is trying to find a place convenient that's to an existing school that you have. I mean, there's nothing else right there around it as far as being right there, you know what I'm saying? We can find other property, but then you gotta worry about the, transportation to it, maintaining it, nobody there all the time. So, I mean, you gotta look at that too, so. I mean, I think we ought to use it.
I believe it was $3.2 million. Somebody can check that for me, please, because I might be wrong.
For the what?
What we paid for the land.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
It's in the ballpark.
It's close.
Is it paid off?
Yes.
I knew it was
Yeah.
something like that. Craziness.
Now, one of the things that we do have in our hands right now, and it's on page number 3, I believe, of the handout that we prepared for you. We do have some funding sources that we can depend on right now. And Mr. Parton, a few minutes ago, you mentioned the capital fund balance, and we know there's about $1 million in there right now. We also have put back some ESSER 3 funding for HVAC work specifically, to the tune of about $750,000. I believe that amount is still there. And we've done that intentionally because we knew that was a need. The legislature also has provided a $300,000 sum to Swain County to use for capital needs this budget year. It's sitting there right now waiting for all of us to decide we want to draw it down for something. July 1st of this year, there was supposed to be another $500,000 sitting in that same fund. That's $800,000, to my knowledge, that we should be able to draw on to do some of this work. And so if you add all of those pieces together, we're not sitting here bankrupt. We have some funding that we can apply once we know exactly what direction to go.
Can we use the HVAC money to move on the high school HVAC
Yes.
system?
Yes, sir, we can.
And start it pretty soon?
I would recommend that that's what we do, yes.
What is the estimated cost on that project right now?
That's one of the pieces that I don't know, and if I were to throw a number out, it would probably be wrong. Emily, do you have any idea?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but it is in the report, so if I could maybe find it real quick.
The elementary schools costed us, what, $500,000?
That was to fix the humidity control.
Oh, that's humidity, that wasn't the HVAC?
Well, it was.
It works together.
But see, it's gonna be way above what it took at the elementary
Yeah,
schools.
I don't know, I've not read a lot of this, but we replaced over half of them, I want to
Yes.
I believe. Are these the same units that went out in 2007? I mean, are these the same units that we're talking about, or?
At the high school?
Yeah,
I don't know.
okay, because I know we did the
Are
gym,
those-
we did all the lower part, same time we did the roof, we took all the ballast off the roof and all that.
The units that are showing the greatest need, in my opinion, Tommy, right now are the ones that are sitting on top of the main building. There are 8 units that are sitting up there.
There's 8 units there, there's 4 units in the gym, and they're smaller size. Of the 4 units, we have 2 that are currently functioning. Actually,
So, Mr. Parton, I believe that the first step towards that is to decide, do we want to use a request for qualifications and have people come in and say, we're interested in doing this work and this is an estimate of what we might be looking at having to spend on that? Or do we want to use the design-build process where we say, this is how much money we have, what can you do for that amount?
I see it totally different. Mr. Sale, I see it as we need to decide if we want to fix it and say, we're going to fix this no matter what it takes to do.
Okay.
But I don't know if we can do that. I mean, it's be up to everybody to start or not, because we don't want to fix something partially.
I agree.
We don't want to do a half job and we don't want to mess up the future job neither. If we do change out units or anything, we need them to be compatible with whatever else we're gonna do.
I agree.
And not waste money doing that. But do we have, during the efficiency stuff, did they look at how much that would cost during the performance contract?
Yeah, they may have, Mr. Parton, and I don't remember. That would be a phone call away.
That was one reason why I thought that was a good thing to do, the review performance contract, because they could go through and tell us a whole lot of information.
And I can have that taken care of first thing in the morning and have that information for you all.
But that still leaves us in, I mean, that's one thing. I don't know. I don't even know if that's doable or, I'm just talking. So,
Well, the truth of the matter is the needs that we're seeing right now can become overwhelming for us. And we have to decide, so where do we go?
we have to decide if we're gonna do something or if we're gonna sit back and wait. Even on the land deal, we need to decide, because I doubt we get $3.2 million for 45 acres. I mean, if you sell it, I don't know what you're gonna get for it. It's probably not real good land. I don't know. I've not looked at it real good. But we need to talk and see which direction we want to go on the land for sure. It'd be one thing I suggest that we talk about for sure, is looking at if there's other options, if you know any other options. Do we have any other options on site?
Well, the only other things that we've talked about or thrown around that we really haven't pursued any is we know there's like 3 property owners that are adjacent behind the field house area that would be, they wouldn't be accepting mine, but I'm saying if we had a portion of that property in hand, the waste of the material, it wouldn't change the 45 acres much, we'd still have to rob some material from there to make that land suitable, but it's much more suitable to build on quicker than the 45 acres that's there. But we haven't pursued the property owners and see if they would sell. They're all 3 local.
And everything that I'm throwing out here and talking about is nothing that I know that we can actually do this year anyway, compared to our budget. We just passed a budget the other day for the upcoming year.
Well, what he's saying, there's accessibility about 2.3 million.
Yeah.
And you can do.
Well, I know about this stuff, but with what we have to add to it, or if there's things we,
Depends on which one you're at.
so that's a decision we have to make.
Yeah,
To look at.
If it's a new tract on the 45 acres, then that's a conversation you have to get all done, and we wrap it all up and send it to the local government commission and see if we can even get approved of the loan for one, because it will be a loan.
How many acres does it take for a tract? Official tract?
Oh, I'd have to look up for sure. I mean, an entire middle school would fit on 15 acres. You're probably in the neighborhood of a 5-acre parcel if all you want to put on it is a field and a track around it. We've got some longer range field needs. If we put a middle school at the high school, we're going to displace one of those ball fields. So, you know, if you were in the 5 to 10 acre range of something that was relatively had mild terrain in comparison to the property that you have, you probably could put a pretty good athletic complex on a site like that for 5 or 10 acres, as long as it was a lot easier to grade than what you have. That's why the 45 acres, we use a whole bunch of the 45 acres because we've got to move so much dirt around and cut slopes back so far that we end up using a lot more acreage than what we really would need in that particular case. So I think you'd want to be in the 5 to 10 acres range for an athletic complex that has a few fields on it and parking, as long as it was not quite as steep and we could grade it more easily.
It appears to me, excuse me, it appears to me that on your board, you have someone who may know the people around.
Yes.
And a couple of phone calls in the next couple of days
Yes.
should get us an answer of whether or not they're even interested in selling the
Yes.
property. And then if they are, then we need to know their price range and what they're looking at. So we need to take some steps, is what I'm saying. We need to do something. And I'm agreeing with Kenneth on that. We've got to make some decisions here and move
Yes.
on and do that. So
what can we provide for you to help in the decision-making process? Can we make these phone calls and find out what's available? And I can call Schneider, who did performance contracting, and say, when you were looking at this, I know you thought about prices. What are the prices to replace the units at the high school? And we can bring that information back and look at that.
right.
Which I know those have probably changed since
Well, but
they looked at them, but they should be in the
Yes.
loop to find out pretty quickly.
And you know, they're an electrical service group as well, and so they could look at the electrical needs and pretty quickly come up with an estimate of what it would cost to fix the electrical concerns. I'm confident of that.
What is the cost, Superintendent, of your 3-man team? And where are we on that? I'm sorry?
334, 36.
Say that again loudly so I can hear.
174, 334, 36. Some change.
$175,000. And all we need to do is to advertise. And I believe that we'll get some people interested.
I have a question. So on the track piece, are you looking something like, I think Cross School has a separate complex, not anywhere near their school, but they have a track. Is that what y'all are thinking of, putting the track somewhere else, not even near a school? Or is it gonna be near a school?
The idea currently is that it would be on the 45 acres above that, and I believe the baseball field will be above on the 45 acres. The softball field will move to the outfield of the baseball field in the middle school with the softball field. So it would be away from the school, but not too far.
Joining property.
Well, if you were using Cherokees, that's not a big deal. I mean, that's not that far from, you know, and moving the kids and the cost of that would be greatly reduced.
But we have no guarantee of that at this point, although the Cherokee Board is entertaining conversation about leasing, at least for home meets. But we won't know anything about that till the end of June, my understanding.
Well, but that's not that far away, actually.
It is not.
I mean, we're almost getting to the end of this month, so.
That's a fair statement.
June after that.
So we could put those pieces in place and bring that information to you?
I would think so.
What other information would we need to make decisions on this?
I would like to have a list, maybe from Mr. Deals, of definite, since he's the maintenance man, definite maintenance stuff that, whatever, are you coming to ask us for funding for how much of this or what what are you asking from us?
Now,
I
that
mean,
funding for the maintenance part's gonna come out of the quarter-cent
The
sales.
Article 46
Right.
for that stuff, but
Yes.
like these, the wiring, whatever
We-
if he can get the list, I mean, I know we've got a list here of some, but, and it sounds like he might know more in detail what we're looking at.
Let's let him come up with a total price, and we've got something, like you said, about 2 million that we think we can access
Yes,
already. And if it goes up to like 30 or 35 million, or not 35 million, but 3.5 million, or somewhere in that range, then we may have to sit down and look and see if we can find a way to do what you're asking about. And I agree, if we can do it, that'd be great. Does that include the handling of the air, does it? All the duct work?
no.
Because those have been in there from day one.
And I would recommend that we, at this point, stay away from changing ductwork, because
Yeah,
that's
you gotta
going,
measure.
that's going to create an astronomical cost
I know.
at the high school.
You gotta tear the ceilings out.
Exactly,
But that is an issue.
yes.
That particular issue does show up in the report. And inside of the more comprehensive cost estimating that we've done at the high school and all of the other schools. And so there is cost associated with that in the budget that we've put together. And I'm happy, Mark, if it is helpful to switch back to that summary slide of those maintenance items that shows the total cost for those buckets, if it's helpful.
Some of us old guys sitting here, I would like to take about a 10-minute break and think about what we're going to come back and put on the table as to what we want to accomplish. So let's break for about 10 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you.
That track didn't fit.
We jump from issue to issue, and I lose
It's
good, even just where the crow flies, it could be some distance.
Let's call this meeting back to order, please. One of the things that I think we need to do, you can yell at me or whatever, but I think that we need to set some next steps so that we don't feel like this meeting is just sitting here listening to each other talk about stuff that we've all talked about before. So I'm going to ask Jerry, if he would, to call on his board to help us set some steps, about 5 steps, next steps that we need to do. And we were getting into that as we took a break, but maybe you've thought about it some more and know more coming in. Mark has said that somebody needs to do that. He doesn't feel he has the position to do it. I think he does, but that's fine. But
I can do that, but these are the people who have to answer for the decisions, and I will make recommendations.
Sure,
But
okay.
they have, they need to be accepted then.
Right.
Not that you haven't, don't take it that way, that's not what I mean.
No, we can work that out with Mark, you work with, you can work all that out, that's not the issue.
You mean Mark doesn't tell you how to run your board? Come on.
Mark, we're not gonna run the board, because he does all the hard labor, he does, but we can work that out with all of us, we work together.
All right, so looking at some next steps, I'm gonna let you talk with your board and see
Okay.
where we are, and we can respond. And then we can make some either changes or additions or something else. Commissioner?
I spoke just during the break to a couple of school board members. I could not remember how and why we ended up getting away from playing baseball at the rec park. And I was wondering if that would be a quick and easy fix. If we're looking at no place we don't have a track for next time, how quick it would be maybe to use the baseball fields at the rec park to redo them, get them fixed up for good enough for school use, but maybe there's a reason why they're not. And then where the baseball field is now, use that as a track area for the next track season. I know that the idea is, well, if you put a track there now, and then we can get funding for middle school, we'll be putting middle school on the top of the track. But I'm looking at a very short term, like what's the solution for next year? I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and get some input. How did that evolve away from that, and how hard would it be to go back to that? Then the second thing I wanted to ask was, Mr. Sale, Mr. King, is help us now with funding. How does this, because this is going to be a loan, and do we have loans coming off the books so that we can get loans back on the books and so on, that type of thing, so that we can afford it, you know? If you pay off one car in your family, maybe you can buy another, but it doesn't mean you can buy two if your one's not paid off. So, you know, it's just very simple math sometimes, or maybe not so simple, but you know, it all comes down to funding.
Yes.
Mr. McKinney, you were talking about the prices.
Yes.
You know, the county is too. We're short jailers, we're short nurses,
Yeah.
we're short inspectors, we're short everywhere as well. And so we're all in this, and Mr. Park said we're all in this together. So two-part question. Funding be the second. How did we get away, and is there a quick fix for the ball fields?
I think the ball fields, I believe it is more or less the usage of, if the high school is using those fields after school, the youth suffer and not being able to use those fields. Schedule. It's kind of like gyms. We don't have enough of those, but I'm just saying, I think that's why they actually, high school built their own fields, is because of the scheduling. It takes away from the youth. I think that was the biggest reason. So if we was to do that, that's something that we'd have to take into consideration, is using those fields. And the I know the middle school uses the fields right now, so where would they practice, where would they play, how would we schedule that? I think that's where that comes from.
Seen by use the elementary fields, and how much money does it take to put into their ball fields for practice fields, for softball and the rec league style? Maybe those wouldn't be sufficient for baseball, high school baseball, but for the
Softball,
smaller age groups or the elementary schools, how much money? I'm looking at, I was just thinking in my head, it seems like what we have existing would be easier to fix back up for a quick turn, for a quick solve the issue quickly. The problem that we're facing, it looks like, it's gonna be coming up next year, looks like. So that seems like a quick fix. It may not be a long-term solution.
So are we, Mr. Parson, are we looking at using the current baseball, softball fields to put a temporary track on?
Well, I was just spitballing that idea out there. It's a big flat surface that we already own, and how much money would it take to do that? And I understand that you don't want to put a lot of money in, then just turn around and tear it up and put middle school in. I get the idea. I'm trying to just think that, what are the issues? Travis went into some of it, like why we quit using those fields, but
I think
we don't have a lot of those, there's not a lot of these leagues, they don't have a lot of teams like they used to practicing. That's, I don't think.
Well, I have to say, it's tough. I coach, they're actually practicing right now while I'm at this meeting, and, I mean, we actually we only had one team, so that forced us to join Jackson County.
Right.
So we got one team, Jackson County's got 3. Well, we got our own facilities, but you got T-ball, there's 7, 8, 9 softball, there's the little boys baseball, and they've got 3 teams. Then 12U softball's got 2 teams. We play on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Middle school just got finished, that's gonna help. Middle school held their ball games above the swimming pool, the girls did. The boys held it on the big fields. That will help, but that was 2 school teams that utilize those fields, not 4 school teams, just the 2, So, I mean, I don't even know how we did it back in the day, but
Yeah.
it did happen back in the day, and I do realize that.
It did happen, but I see what you're saying. I appreciate that. I didn't realize how much, so that's being utilized a whole lot.
You got to,
A lot of
I have to put in on Mondays, you have to put in 7 days in advance for field space.
Gotcha.
So, but I mean, it works out, but I'm just saying it would be, I don't know, it'd be more difficult, but I'm sure we can make it happen. Just push you later in the night. Days are longer now, so.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
See, Rod, this is why when we done the event park, I wanted to see if we could incorporate some type of field, soccer field bid or some type of field to open up something else we had and utilize the tourism money.
Is there enough room for a track up there?
There was 8 acres up there. I don't know
Now, I
what's
will
left.
say this
To answer
on the
your
other
question,
side,
yes, there is.
is they won't allow us to use school property to practice on because we're not covered under the insurance versus county property. So in other words, my team couldn't go practice at the football practice field, because we wouldn't be covered, or we couldn't go out to East Elementary and practice in the track or something.
See, we couldn't put a track up there though.
I guess
because
those are
it
new
would be-
regulations, aren't they? That we all used to not have to
Everybody's
deal,
so
no
happy,
one,
so, yeah.
no one used to have to deal with that.
That's right.
Those are new regulations. So I guess the second part then of that question is funding. How do we get creative? Let's hear the creative funding that we're gonna have to look into.
That really is a Kevin question, because we can't create funding.
There are some loans coming off, and I think our total to about, I want to say about 600,000 a year in debt. In Article 30 and 60, Article 42 and 40. Of course, it has increased just like 46 in it. And so that money is going to pay off that debt. We're right now looking at about a $1.2 million a year on those 2. And so if you look at that, debt capacity is going to be $500,000 roughly. Just utilizing those, without the 46, if we use 46 for something else. So whatever $500,000 can buy at this point without, raising taxes and getting into all that, is what you can afford. About $500,000 in debt. And that would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $4.5 million. But if you put that with like 4.5 plus the 2.3, there's 6.5. And that's without doing any extra revenue coming in.
Looks like we're
So-
gonna need to do some more individual discussions and, because I'm going everywhere right now in my mind
Right.
with it.
Yeah.
I
That's
keep-
why I turned it over to you, Jerry.
But I can't handle it, I tell you. I keep leaning toward fixing what we've got it somehow the best we can, so our kids at least covered until we can reach some final decisions. And I agree, that was my thought all along, put the track down below the schools. But I always come back to, if you, a middle school there because of that security thing. I mean, we're putting the road in this spring, or this summer, that the state provided for us. They're building a road around the school to come out on Bryson Branch, so that we can lock off that school even better. And our plans are to eventually get it to where it's a lot more secure than what it is. If you have another school there, I may be wrong, but I just think you've got a lot more security there that way.
So if we resurfaced the track the way it is now, nobody would come and compete?
I think they would, but
wouldn't want
I
to.
can't speak for the other schools. The kids could practice. You know, if we could fix it up good enough where they can do a practice, and it may be we can go back and find some place to put some on that ridge behind and put some more facilities for the other events. We're just limited to space there. We can eat up that whole area in front of that new building, but then when come football season, we can do something else, because we gotta have, you know, parking an issue up there too, so.
Okay, as far as next steps goes, are we talking now about the track being fixed up, or what's the next step? What are we trying to do here?
I think that what Mr. McKinney has said is, perhaps the board needs an opportunity to sit and to decide what they would recommend would be the next steps.
Okay.
And I would be pleased to make recommendations to them, but I believe that that would be the next step, and then bring those to the Board of Commissioners for final agreement.
Prices on all 5 steps, right?
If we can, yes, so we know what we really got our hands on. So, yes, very much so. Okay, so let me ask this question then. Are we, the people sitting around this table, are we ready to end this meeting until you guys go have your meeting and then come back and we can call another special meeting? So that we can continue the discussion and not let it fall to the side. Sometimes that happens when you try to schedule meetings, but
Yeah, I've got one more question on these 5 steps.
go ahead.
These 5 steps are immediate, or do you want each step to be a year, or how do y'all want them dictated?
I personally, now the rest of them can speak for themselves, but I personally would like to know, when we call them next steps, what do we need to do? And where does the money come from that we want to do these things? Or we want to repair the track? What is that going to cost us? How long is it going to take us? That kind of thing is what I'm looking at. Can we use some of the other fields? You guys, can you use some of the other fields? Are they too busy? Are they not standard, official? That kind of stuff, so that when we sit back down, we then know the money that we need in order to do this, so that we're not trying to block any progress that we're wanting to make in the whole budget thing.
Okay,
But-
do you want it, I guess my question is do you want a 3-year, 5-year, or do you want a year comprehensive plan?
Well, right now, it's not a comprehensive plan because we're just trying to repair and get by. So I would think a year is what I would be looking at.
So all 5 steps will have to do with this year?
Right, yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I want to know.
Okay.
The most, excuse me,
Go ahead,
Mr.
go ahead.
I need to know what exactly is the most important things that even the 3 people can start working on, and what we can, if there's any way any of our people can help, which I don't think so. We got them stretched out pretty good, don't we, for other projects? But, and also with these funding sources, we have to tell them before we can draw this out, we have to have an idea of what we're using it for, correct? Is that
Yes,
how it
sir.
works? Because that's how, when we have to draw money, certain things, we have to have we're gonna use this money on this
Yes.
right now.
And Mr. Parker, there will be some stipulations on some of that money that will not allow us to use it, let's say, for a track.
Right.
The 800,000, for instance, that's for renovate, that's repair or
Yes.
maintenance only. It's
The
not for-
700, the 800,000, what was it?
Yeah, the 300.
Three and the five.
this year,
Okay,
500.
the 750 is for the HVAC.
That's for HVAC.
Improvement, for sure. I mean, even those need to be connected together for us to look at, like what can we do the fastest with these funds, and because the unions we'll have to say, we need these funds now for this.
Yes, that's exactly right.
I think you made a comment, 50% of the work can be accomplished with a three-man team.
Yes.
I mean,
And
that'd be a simple solution, if you could work through that.
it,
And that would be my next concern, is that if you're looking at the three-man team doing things within the first year and then even into the second year, in 2 years, can we have a three-man team on staff? That would be my concern, because if they're going to be called on to do these things, we need them here, not up here, but here. So,
Well, lots of this stuff ain't even three-man team.
no, it isn't.
This is, I mean, we need to go ahead with three-man team probably, if that's what we need to do.
And that may be one of the 5 things that you guys come back to us on. That three-man team may be one of your high priorities at this point, just because of the things that need to happen.
we have identified, Mr. Parton, what the projects are on that. I left them off of this because I thought it would limit confusion, but I thought backwards. And I apologize for that.
We stay confused, I think. I do.
But that can be fixed first thing in the morning. It's on my desk now.
Okay.
I think that we're ready to say that the three-man team is like, we would like to go ahead and make that request, right?
I would like to go ahead and move on that, and I would like to guarantee that that would be in place for 2 years. And then personally, I don't see a problem with that because it's coming out of Article 46 money.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
it's not gonna affect the tax structure or anything, you know, and that will allow us to move forward and handle a lot of things, in my opinion.
Were we paying any loan out of Article 46? We didn't, we wasn't paying none of the
No.
improvement out of it?
All that money is really, if we don't use it, of course, now you did make a request, I think, 211,000 this last month. So besides that, nothing.
But we've found some additional, Stephanie found some additional money, some surplus that we had, and we've been able to take some of those items off of that request. So we no longer need 211. It's come down by 50%.
So what would be the budget on the two-man, the three-man team plus the, whatever you're gonna be fixing, another 100,000 on top of that, so we're at 275, if that's the material it's gonna take, I mean.
I didn't look at that, make sure. I hate to commit a ton of money to a total to what it would cost us, because some of the stuff that we're gonna have to get done are not gonna be things that necessarily cost prohibitive to do, but they're labor intensive to do, like the seal plates and those things that are
Yes.
shipped in at the elementary schools. If we have to hire somebody else to do that, it's mostly labor, but it's high dollar. But we can do those with this small crew. So it's hard to put a quote on how much it would cost us in terms of material. What I think that I was asked for earlier was to take basically our 5 fastest trains coming. What is it that we think that we need to do? What are the fastest trains coming? Safety. You know, we gotta look at safety for kids, and then we've got to make sure that then we look at the comfort, and we gotta make sure that we provide for them like we're bound to, our best evidence binds us to something. And then, when I take this 5-man crew, I'm gonna say, these are the projects that we want to get done in the first 12 months with that 5-man crew, or with a 3-man crew, so that we can say then budgetarily what we think each one of those will cost, and I'll start working on that tomorrow.
Okay, Jerry, can you and your board come up with those steps for us and then get back with us?
Yes.
Okay, and so what we will do, how much time do you think you're going to need to do that?
A week.
6 p.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, 6 p.m. tomorrow. I'm serious, it can be decided that quickly.
That can be done quickly.
Yes, it can.
You want me to call those 3 people on the property too, right?
Yes, right, yeah.
That's one of the steps.
That will just be one of the steps that we're looking at.
Next
So, a week from tonight, or you want to do it sooner than that?
Next week?
That's fine.
Yeah, and
Okay, Kevin King, a week from tonight, we're going to set up another special meeting with the school.
I can't be here a week from
Can we do it on Wednesday?
Say again,
Can we do it on Wednesday
Wednesday?
next week?
Don't you go to church?
We do it on Tuesday?
He's firing his pastor. No.
Really?
Yeah, my pastor just left mission, so.
He's,
Would Wednesday be fine
good
with
with me.
everyone?
I'll have to check and see.
Okay. Why is it looking for, Mark?
Wednesday? I can make Wednesday work, I can make Tuesday, I can make Thursday won't work next week, that's the academic banquet.
I don't think you can make Tuesday work either.
I can't,
Portrait design team.
oh, I can't, well, you're right. Wednesday's it next week.
Okay, well, let's, what we'll do is we'll dismiss, but we'll also reset the schedule for next Wednesday at 6 o'clock here. Everyone comfortable with that?
If not, I will message you.
Okay, all right. Speaking of your banquet next week, we have decided that Kevin Siegel will represent the Board of Commissioners because we have a meeting that night, and I think we're going to have some stuff to deal with.
Okay.
I hope this is part of it. Okay? Anybody have anything else for the good of the order? If not, Commissioners, I will take a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor to adjourn. All those in favor, manifest it by raising your right hand.
Mr. McKinney needs to do the same thing, sir.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second? All right, all in favor by standing up. We adjourn.
All in favor, go home. Thank you guys very, very much.
Thank you.